In the last discussion I had with you, we spoke about Daniel 7.
Indeed.
So I'll just read that out for people who are here.
Who haven't bothered watching the previous video. What have you been doing all the year?
Because there's two things I want to establish with this discussion with Josh is, one, the Jewish expectation of the Messiah, and two, did Jews actually believe that the Messiah was divine? And three, did they believe in a suffering Messiah? So if we go to Daniel, we'll start on with the divinity aspect.
Of course. The thrones or the clouds of heaven? Which one do you want to start with today?
We will start with the thrones.
Yeah, he's back, isn't it?
So,
He's back.
he's back. So, we'll go to Daniel, start with the thrones.
Yay, the thrones.
That is...
Verse 9. Verse 9. It says as follows in Aramaic.
Yep.
Chosei haves ad vichosavon memiv v'atik yomin yosef. As I looked, thrones were placed, and an ancient of days did sit, whose levushech kesag chivor us aveshech ka'amar nikei, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of whose head was like the pure wool. Kosiech shaviven dinor galgilohi nur dolik. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels being burning fire.
So, here we see, and I'll get the Jewish... What is your understanding of this text?
My understanding of this text is that there are two thrones, right? One throne is the throne of righteousness, and one throne is something else which I forget.
Okay, so basically this text talks about someone with the Ancient of Days. So
Yes.
I'll just read it again. So as I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat, and his clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out before him, and 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Now what I want to do, I want to go to the Chagiga.
Yeah, Chagiga. Yes.
And it says...
You're going to start with Rabbi Akiva, of course?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
So now, it says... The Gemara poses another question. One verse states, his throne was fiery flames, and another phrase in the same verses state, till thrones were placed, and one who was the Ancient of Days sat, implying the existence of two thrones. The Gemara answers, this is not difficult. One throne is for him, and one is for David. As it is taught in the Baraita,
This is the statement.
with regard to this issue,
Yes.
one throne for him and one for David. And this is the statement of Rabbi Akiva.
Yes.
Rabbi Yosei
Hagelili.
Hagegeli
Yeah,
said to
Mr.
him,
Galilean. Came from
how
Galilee.
long shall you make the divine presence profane by presenting it as though one could sit next to him? Rather, the two thrones are designed for different purposes, one for judgment and one for righteousness. Now, the reason why I read this is because he said one throne is for God and the other is for David. And another rabbi said, how can you profane the divine presence? Meaning, how can you attribute something human to what is of God? Now, this would be like a church father saying Christ wasn't born of the virgin birth. It's a mistake that someone of that level does not make. So this is why when we look at the earliest Judaic text, the understanding that the Messiah, or there was a divine figure, someone could be divinized, this is like some of the very first evidence of it. And if you explain, and we'll go into Daniel further and explain why this would lead to a concept of a divine Messiah.
Right. So, in order to understand any piece of Gemara, you need to see it in its Aramaic or Hebrew text, depending on whether it's in Aramaic or Hebrew. Most of the Gemara is, of course, in Aramaic, but that's neither here nor there. And you need to analyze, because the Gemara is not just telling you things randomly. The Gemara is here to teach you lessons, and it's here to show you intricate arguments between our sages of blessed memory. And in this case, between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yosei Haglili, who were contemporaries. Rabbi Akiva was one of the greatest sages that there were in the Tannaic period. Rabbi Yossi Glili is the only rabbi who ever beat Rabbi Akiva in an argument in the Gemara.
Okay.
He's the only one.
So the question
and
would
it happens
be
twice, once here and once in Tractate
So the
Pesachim.
question would be, how
So the
can
question
someone
is-
so renowned make such a mistake?
So that's the question. So when we have a look at what the text says, what is the words that Rabbi Yossi Haglili uses when he accuses Rabbi Akiva of doing such a terrible thing? So he says the Hebrew words are Ad Mosai ato ose shchinocho. Until when will you make the divine profane? Until when will you make the divine profane? Now the Gemara does not waste words. Usually the Gemara would say in such a thing that you're being mechalel the Shekhinah, or mechalel Shem Shamayim. You are desecrating heaven, or desecrating the divine. Here it uses a more roundabout way, and he says, until when will you make the divine profane? Why does he not say, until when do you profane the divine? What's this business of making the divine profane? So the answer is because Rabbi Yossi Haglili, who held Rabbi Akiva in such high esteem, as we see from other statements he makes elsewhere, obviously did not really believe Rabbi Akiva actually thought that God and the Messiah are on the same level.
But, you're saying what he thought he believed, but I'm asking you, why did Akiva say that?
So why did Rabbi Akiva say that?
Yes.
So to answer this question, we go to one of the classical commentaries on Agadic portions of the Gemara, the Chidushei Agodus, written by the Maharshal, who was a rabbi who lived, I believe, in the 16th century in Poland, or could be the 17th century, and his name was Rabbi Shlomo Adels, or Shmuel Adels.
So his title was Rabbi back then, 16.
And known as the Maharshal.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a very long commentary on this piece of Gemara, of which I've printed out the relevant parts.
So does it give
And
Akiva's
it does,
opinion
and it gives
of why?
his opinion. And it explains as follows.
So is it Akiva's opinion of why he said it, or someone else's opinion?
It gives Akiva's opinion as to why he said it.
Sorry, let me rephrase that.
It explains Akiva's reasoning for saying what he said, and then explains of Yossi's reasoning for saying what he said, and explains what's happening in the dialogue between them.
So let me just make it clear. It gives Akiva's statement of why he said it, or someone else's opinion of why they thought he said it.
Oh no, this is this. Okay, whenever you learn Gemara, because of course you're not familiar with this, the Gemara world is a world that you are not familiar with, and no one would expect you to be familiar with it. Because, as you may know, the majority of the Gemara is very legal, and we deal a lot with intricate arguments between rabbis. And the way you're supposed to study the Gemara is...
what I'm asking is what you're going to read.
I'm answering your question, but you need an introduction before you can hear the answer, because otherwise you won't understand the answer. The way you study a Gemara is you analyze the intricate arguments between the rabbis and try to work out why this rabbi said that and this rabbi said that, and what's the argument between them.
So you're not going to provide me a statement of why he said it. You're going to provide something of why you think he might have said it. Because remember, if he made such a grave mistake in the
I'm
statement,
going to explain to you.
We want to know why he said it, not what someone else thinks.
We're going to explain to you what the Maharshal says is the reasoning of Rabbi Akiva.
And did he get that opinion from Akiva, or did
No.
he? So
he worked it out.
He worked it out. Okay. Give us the reasoning. We're trying to find out, why did this person make a statement that divinizes this person, but I'm asking for a response from that person to say, I said it because X, Y, and Z, not someone trying to then rectify it, because even if we look in the Talmud, they just said he's not an expert on Agadah.
Yes.
Right. That was so basically, they're trying to say that, well, he's not an expert in this field, so that's his mistake. But that still doesn't make the excuse of why he made that statement.
Here's the explanation. This is the explanation. So, in order to understand this explanation, because this entire explanation is based on a single premise, which is the premise known as drush.
Okay.
Now, I've talked about drush with you before, and I've said that drush is where you have extra letters or missing letters or extra words, missing words, repeated phrases, these kind of things in the text of the Tanakh the Hebrew Bible, and we believe that God put those there for a reason, and He gave us certain rules in the oral law as to how to interpret them. Now, now, over here, this is what is in play. The Maharshal says as follows, that and he's basing it on the explanation of Rashi of this Gemara, which I would encourage you to look into it if you are interested. But basically, he says as follows: if you look at the words in the verse, can you open the verses in Daniel? The word for throne, when you've got the Hebrew there.
Daniel what?
This is Daniel chapter 7.
Okay,
It won't take long, I'll just open it myself. I'll open it myself.
Okay.
what verse?
Daniel chapter 7 verse 9. Let's get up the
Yeah,
Hebrew. It says in the Hebrew, which is really Aramaic, but whatever, it says...
Or
the-
say?
so
Daniel
in
7.
so in the first time that it says the word throne, the first time that it has the word for throne, here we are. It spells it Kof Reish Samach Vov Nun. The second time
Is
it,
that the same Hebrew as this one?
yeah.
So why does it say Kosei and then the
Yeah,
phonetic is Kosei?
so that is the that's
Okay.
the singular without any possessive suffixes.
So the point is.
So I'm honestly
This is
I've only
singular.
started.
It's just, you're
I've
not
only just
talking about
started.
this.
The
throne.
first one, Kaf Reish Samach Vav Nun, okay, which is of course the plural thrones, okay, it has a strange way of showing the plural. The usual way of showing the plural would be to put in Yud Nun, not Vav Nun. So why did they put in a Vav Nun? This seems to be a grammatical inaccuracy. The second thing we need to ask...
It's a grammatical inaccuracy in the Torah.
I said seems to be a grammatical inaccuracy.
Does God
You
make
mean-
mistakes?
No.
The prophets make mistakes?
No.
Okay, all right. Just so we establish
As
that.
I already said, these are
Okay.
put in on purpose. I'm going to explain them.
Okay.
Okay? You seem to be jumping the gun.
No, I'm just getting clarification for people who may not
who
understand
may
what
not
you're
have
talking about.
may not have bothered listening to what I said 2 minutes ago. You have very little faith in the viewer. The second time it says says the word kosiyeh, okay, kof reish samach yud hey, and here we have the expected grammatical form of the word, without any extra letters, without any differences in the lettering that we would have expected from a grammatical point of view. So we have two different opinions in our tradition as to what is the reason for this strange vav nun suffix that we find in the first words there, and this appears two other places in Tanakh. The most notable is on the word Shabbaton, which is talking about the laws of the Day of Atonement in Leviticus.
Okay,
And, and over there we also have this strange additional vav nun at the end of a word that seems to be out of place. So over there, there's an argument about what exactly the vav nun is doing. Rabbi Akiva holds of one opinion, and Rabbi Yossi HaGalili holds of the other opinion. Now,
okay.
Rabbi Akiva holds, and this is what the Maharshal says, that the extra nun, the extra vav nun in the word kosovon
yeah.
is More al Harabim. This teaches on the many.
So basically,
Okay.
you're saying is a possible misreading of the text or misinterpretation of the text.
What's a possible misinterpretation of the text?
So you're saying there's two different.
There's two different ways of understanding it.
Yes.
Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi HaGalili,
Yes.
they agree on the point that this needs to be this inaccuracy, this grammatical inaccuracy, needs to be explained using a drush, and they agree that it's that it's going to be something which is about comparative being.
But this-
about comparing, this is a very complicated point.
But this is
very
the-
nuanced.
but this is the issue.
This is not the usual way of.
But this is the issue. If there are two different possible ways of taking it,
Yes.
as someone who is such an expertise within his field, he should know he should not be able to accept the incorrect reading of the text.
Because they're not, neither of them are incorrect. That's the problem. Hold on.
So-
Rabbi Akiva, okay, the problem is that the way Rabbi Akiva uses this drush, which is More al Harabim, it teaches about the many, okay, and it basically means that the two.
So the issue is why are there more than basically for the let me just explain. So the issue is why is there plurality of thrones?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So now
So-
that's what has caused an issue. So they're wondering. So
Sorry,
you're saying
I've read this wrong. Sorry. It says it's Mo al Hakatnos. It teaches about the smallness. This is the clip. Okay. So Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi are really arguing about whether or not this Vav Nun, which is added,
Yeah.
is there to tell you that one throne is smaller than the other, or are the thrones the same size? Okay. This is really the argument. Now, according to Rabbi Akiva's opinion, that this Vav Nun means that what this throne is smaller than the other throne, then according to him, there's no profanity being made here. Because you have David's throne, which is smaller than God's throne. But according to Rabbi Yossi's opinion, that the Vav Nun comes to teach you...
But that still doesn't
comes to
make
teach
sense,
you that-
because even if-
Can we finish the sentence? According to Rabbi Yossi, who does not hold that, okay, these thrones are the same size, okay, according to Rabbi Akiva's opinion, okay, when you look at Rabbi Akiva. Now, if you were to put Rabbi Yossi into Rabbi Akiva's opinion,
So
okay, then Rabbi
basically-
Akiva does not see any profanities in Rabbi Yossi.
So you're
but when you put Rabbi Yossi in Rabbi Akiva, when you put Rabbi Akiva in Rabbi Yossi's opinion, Rabbi Yossi sees a profanity. Now, Rabbi Yossi does not think Rabbi Akiva is actually profaning God. What does he say? He says people like Paperboy here are going to look at the Talmud and come with the wrong conclusion. They're going to see Rabbi Akiva and say. And say, oh, he's doing something which, according to which according to our understanding of the Messiah, is something which is profane.
So basically-
and therefore he says, "Ad mosai ato oseh shchinacho." Until when are you making the divine profane? Not until when you're profaning the divine. No, heaven forbid. Rabbi Akiva was not profaning the divine. Rabbi Yossi never suggested such a thing. He's making it.
And
He's
it-
making
and
it
it-
seem as if he is making the divine profane, and that is exactly what Paperboy's
so this is what
misunderstanding
my
is, and his
entire-
misunderstanding has come
And this is
from not understanding how to learn a piece of Gemara, because he has not been taught.
And this is
how
what
to
my
do
point
so.
is. Rabbi Akiva lived in the 2nd century. This is after Christ. Because Christians are obviously claiming Christ to be divine. So the later rabbi has to then admonish Akiva for
They're
giving...
not later; they're in the same generation.
Yeah,
They are-
but
they are
when I
they're
say later, as in
contemporaries.
he's made the statement and he's later corrected him, as in that's what I mean by later.
Oh,
So,
right, the next line of the Gemara.
well, that wouldn't have been historically the next line.
no, it would.
So it would have been a space
discussion
of
between the two.
space of time. So he said a statement, and
And
then
he-
someone's responded.
Yes.
So my point is this: because if they do not make that a heretical view, it gives legitimacy to the Christians to then claim that Jesus, a throne is for David, or a human can sit on a throne that is associated for God. So then what he said is no, one of the thrones is for his footstool. So both thrones are for God, but one is his footstool, one is his throne. Whereas the other person said no, one is for God, one is for David, who they kind of sometimes call the Messiah. So that's why you're profaning something attributed to God.
Why did you say you're making the divine profane instead of you're profaning God? Because you're not actually profaning God. You're making it look. Okay.
So you're elevating a human to the same
No,
status of God.
you're making people who are not learned, who look at this and will say you are that here is a profaning of God. Not that you are profaning God, because according to Rabbi Akiva's opinion, there's no profaning of God.
But-
We've got David's throne, which is smaller than God's
But
throne.
you've just said it will give people like Paperboy an excuse to do what?
To say that the Messiah is divine.
Thank you very much. That was my point. Now let's continue to Daniel 14.
But couldn't the thrones be used as like how you'd say the we, like
Yeah.
the royal we?
No, that's based on the grammar, so it's nothing to do with that. And there was no Jewish understanding of plural majesty. We can look in the text. There's no
I know, but
there's no
used
such
that
thing in
before, so-
Judaism. So
Not today.
so that was my very point. Now we'll go on to Daniel 7:14 because
yes, because you still have failed to
Yes.
give a reason why the attendants didn't mention the clouds.
now we'll go through 7:14. It's
Yes.
jumping on in Daniel, and it says, "I saw in the night visions, and
Wait,
behold."
Before you do, I'm just going to recap for the viewer who may not have remembered or seen the previous video.
Mhm.
But in the previous video, we looked at 7:14, and we
Yeah.
saw also in the attendant explanation of 7:14.
Yeah.
And Paperboy gets very hung up about the clouds of that this
Son of
this
Man.
one like a son of man comes
In the clouds of
comes
heaven.
in the clouds of heaven. He gets very hung up about that, and he says, "Oh, look, it must be divine. It must be the Messiah. It must be Jesus."
Yes.
Right. And I
Not,
was
not
saying,
Jesus. Don't say just say like a divine person.
and I
Yeah.
was saying because you say that it's the divine figure, and
Yes.
it's the divine figure which is you believe is the Messiah,
Yes.
who you believe is Jesus.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you look at how the attendant explains it, how does he explain it?
Yeah.
He explains
Yeah.
no, hold on, because in this verse 7:14,
Shall I read it, and
says
then we-
that splendor, kingship, and grandeur, these kind of things,
Mm.
were given to this one like Son of Man who came with the clouds of heaven.
Yeah.
The attendant explains who was kingship, splendor, grandeur given to. It was given to the holy ones of the Most High,
Okay.
which is of course the Jewish people.
All right.
Now, over there, he makes no mention of the clouds of heaven.
Yeah.
We can only assume the clouds of heaven must be a metaphor, just like the fact that the animals who came from beasts who came from up from the sea at the beginning of the chapter are actually talking about kingdoms who did not actually literally come from the sea and are not literally animals.
Okay. So now, when I first read this verse to you, and it says one like the Son of Man, you said it must be someone who's not human that looks like a human. Now you're saying it's the nation of Israel, or it's
I
a
retracted
it's-
30 seconds after you said that originally.
Let me just
And you
correct.
know it.
Let,
Two
let- let me just
videos
get your
ago.
confirmation. So now you're saying this one like the Son of Man is not a person. Is that correct?
The one like a Son of Man
Yes.
is the nation of Israel.
Is okay.
That is
now,
exactly what
now
the
I'm
attendant
going
says.
to read it.
That, it's not what I'm saying, it's what the attendant...
Wait, okay.
Forget about me.
Let me read the
Look,
passage.
let me-
Josh,
hold
calm
on,
down.
hold on,
Calm down.
hold on,
Okay,
hold
the
on.
attend.
Forget about me. Forget
Okay,
about me.
Josh is
this
saying
is
the
about
attendant
this is about what God
explained
thinks.
it.
This is about what God
Okay.
thinks.
All right.
And God gave Daniel prophecy, and Daniel accepted what the attendant said.
Okay.
Okay.
So
This is very
I'm
important.
going to read it. So it says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like the Son of Man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. And then we go on, because it's quite a long passage, where the attendant describes what each of the four beasts are. And then we get to 26, it says, but the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the heavens under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So based on this, Josh is saying the attendant is explaining the Son of Man as the nation of Israel. But we have a problem, because when we go to Sanhedrin 98a, it says, Rabbi Alexandri says Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi raises a contradiction between two depictions of the coming Messiah. It is written, there came with the clouds of heaven one like unto a Son of Man, and there was given to him dominion and glory and a kingdom, and his dominion is an everlasting dominion. And it is written, behold, your king will come to you just as he is just and victorious, lowly and riding upon a donkey, upon a colt and the foal of a donkey, Zechariah 9:9. So now, if
Read
that
the
is,
answer, read the answer.
Rabbi Alexandria explains, if the Jewish people merit redemption, the Messiah will come in a miraculous manner with the clouds of heaven. If they do not merit redemption, the Messiah will come lowly on a
Now, if you
riding
look in the
upon a donkey.
Hebrew-
Wait, let me just finish my point.
Okay.
He said Daniel 7:14 is the nation of Israel. So how can it then be a contradiction between whether he comes with the clouds or on a donkey? Because it must be the nation of Israel is coming on the clouds, because that he just said Daniel 7:14 is about the nation of Israel. So then how do we get the Messiah from the nation of
I am
Israel?
so glad you asked.
Okay.
So in the Hebrew, if you look there,
Yes.
it does not, nowhere does it say that Rabbi Alexandri, in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua, actually thinks that the person who came with the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven is the Messiah. However, and how do I know that? Because when you look
Say
in
that
the
again.
Hebrew, when you look in the Hebrew, what does it say in the answer? It says, one second. Zochu im ananei shmaya lo zochu. What does that mean? If they merit, okay,
Yes.
then.
So if they merit redemption, Israel's going to come and redeem
then
themselves.
No. me finish the
Let him answer.
sentence.
Okay.
Wow.
All right.
You're going to get there quicker.
My goodness. My
Keep
goodness.
interrupting. It's not going to look good on the video.
Honestly, you're gonna look bad for the punters who talk about.
Well,
you
we have to
spreading a
hold
good
you,
message.
pin you down on what you say.
No, let him finish.
All right.
Honestly,
Okay,
you're
go
making yourself look bad.
All right.
Yeah,
Finish.
you are. Stop it.
Honestly. Now. Yeah, I know. You're all riling up. Okay, so he said the answer says Zochu. If they have merited, okay, then he'll come as a poor man on a donkey. Lo Zochu. If they've not merited, then im Ananei Shemaya. Okay, what does this mean? No mention is made of the Messiah in the actual Hebrew text. The translation has there's no mention of the Messiah in the Hebrew text. If you look in the Hebrew text.
In all of the whole Hebrew text, the Messiah to come is not mentioned as the Messiah. It's interpreted
No, I'm
as the
talking
Messiah.
about in that Gemara over there.
Okay.
The Gemara you just quoted.
Okay,
No
yeah,
one
yeah.
mentions the Messiah. Okay. This is a translation that you put. Really, it's talking about the redemption. Okay. The redemption. How is the redemption to come? On the one hand, we see in Zechariah that the Messiah, who is the Redeemer, who's to bring the redemption, is going to come as a pauper on a donkey. But in Daniel, we see that the redemption of the Jewish people is going to come, is described as coming with the clouds of heaven, right? Because the Jewish people is the one like a son of man. And over there, it's talking about when the fourth beast is destroyed, the fourth beast being the last of the exiles, which could be Rome, right? Which, of course, is really metaphorical for the whole Edomite society of what ended up becoming Western culture that we have today. That it has. I've lost my train of thought. What was
You're
I saying?
explaining the interpretation of how the Messiah will come.
So we see that this is talking about the redemption of the Jewish people because it's after the destruction of the fourth beast. The redemption of the Jewish people happens to be the Messianic age, and the Messiah is the one who's going to herald it. How is this redemption going to come about? Is this redemption going to be something which is the Messiah coming as a pauper on a donkey, or is this redemption going to come look like the Jewish people, the nation is going to be coming on the clouds of heaven? What's this redemption going to be like? This seems to be a contradiction, says Rabbi Alexandria in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. And so he answers, if they, the Jewish people, have merited, then redemption will come in the form of the Messiah as a pauper on a donkey. But if they have not merited, then redemption will come in the form of coming on the clouds of heaven.
So now, this is from Safari, which is a Jewish. Everything here is non-Christian, and it says Levi raises a contradiction between two depictions of the coming of the Messiah. You said it wasn't in the Hebrew. This is not a Christian interpretation.
No,
I'm asking you, why would your fellow Jews, and let me just actually show.
When I learn a Gemara, I
Yes.
don't care about somebody else's translation.
Okay.
I learn a Gemara, I read the text,
All right.
and then I explain it based on what the text says.
Okay.
That's what a true student of the Gemara does. That's why if you look in any of the Talmudic academies you have today in yeshivas, nobody learns. Okay, people
Well,
do not
clearly-
generally learn from, for example, an art scroll. Why? Because the art scroll will give you some sort of interpretation, and you haven't worked it out yourself.
Who's
the Gemara you're supposed to
The
work it
William
out yourself.
Davidson Talmud.
I don't know who William Davidson is.
Okay.
I've never heard of him.
All right.
It's not a Talmud that.
Well, it's
that
just
I've
a
ever heard of.
translation.
The only Talmuds that I've ever heard of in terms of translations are the Art Scroll, the Steinsaltz, the what's the old one? The Sonsino.
Well,
that's the
I'm
one.
just showing you clearly.
Right.
We see here, look, Sanhedrin 90, and this
I
is not a
don't, I
Christian
don't,
text.
I
so-
don't know who William Davidson is. He doesn't sound Jewish. I don't know
Okay.
who he is.
So, but this is the thing.
Maybe you should look him
Well,
up.
this is the thing.
wanna look
If
him up?
Rabbi
You've gotta take
Yehoshua ben Levi raises 2 points, one about the Messiah coming on a donkey, the
Yes.
other point has to refer to the Messiah as well. That's
Not
why.
necessarily.
So you're-
if he's talking about it, that would only be
Okay.
if the topic of
That's
discussion
terms
is
of
the
the merit
Messiah.
upon
If
merit.
the topic of discussion is about look, what I'm doing is the way I'm interpreting is I'm triangulating. I'm looking at the answer and
Yes.
using the answer to explain the question. The answer says is talking all about the Jewish people meriting redemption.
Okay, read
or
the
not
Hebrew
meriting.
word for word.
Okay. Omar of Alexandria
translate it.
of Yeshua ben Levi.
Yes.
Of Alexandria says in the name of Yeshua ben Levi. Ksiv, it is written, V'aru im ananei shomaya kvar enosh. and came with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man. Ato, you. Uchsiv, Ani v'rochiv. Sorry, also he came. Right. Uchsiv, and it's written, Ani v'rochiv al chamor, a pauper and riding on a donkey. Zochu im ananei shemaya, if they've merited with the clouds of heaven. Lo zochu, if they've not merited, Ani rochiv al chamor. Then he's a pauper riding on a donkey.
Right. So now what I'm trying to highlight is that even if Josh is going through the strict Hebrew, the context of what is being discussed is very clear. The Messiah is going to come on a donkey for one reason. Then he's saying, well, it doesn't say specifically Messiah relating to the clouds of heaven. Obviously, clearly what is being weighed up is how the Messiah is going to arrive, even if it doesn't say specifically in the text the word Messiah. But you're trying to say, well, because it doesn't say the word Messiah, one is about him coming on the donkey, if we deserve whatever, and him, and something else, given a totally different contextual understanding to...
If we talk about the Messiah as a redeeming figure, and we talk about this whole thing here that he's talking about is a contradiction in the nature of the redemption of Israel,
Yes.
then it doesn't. Then it works perfectly well according to my understanding. I understand where you're coming from.
Yes.
I totally understand where you're coming from, but you have to accept that my interpretation is at least just as good.
Because what I'm saying is, if we go by Daniel 7:14, if it's the nation of Israel, comparing the nation of Israel to how the Messiah is going to come on a donkey does not make sense. It only makes sense if you understood this as a messianic verse and you're comparing, well, it's saying he's coming in...
verse. It's not the same as a verse about the Messiah.
A verse about how the Messiah is going to come.
Or, alternatively, a verse about how the redemption is to unfold.
And who comes in the redemption? The Messiah.
Yes.
Exactly. So they're both about the Messiah. Because how he arrives is based on the redemption in your view. So if you are good, he will come in one way. If you are bad, he will come in another way. So it both points to the Messiah and his coming. Okay, explain in your understanding how
As I've
it
already
makes
explained,
sense.
okay? Because I'm sure the viewer has already understood the point I'm making. I believe you're actually trying to deliberately not understand. You're not misunderstood what I'm saying. You seem to be deliberately trying to act as if I'm saying is ridiculous.
It doesn't make, it's not consistent.
You're
what I'm saying.
being, as they say, obtuse.
No.
Because you understand perfectly well what I'm saying. It's perfectly clear. What I said was that you could understand this as talking contextually about the Messiah, and that both sides, okay, the donkey and the clouds of heaven, it's both talking about the Messiah, okay, and that's what the context is. Alternatively, you could look at, okay, and I look at these as Messiah verses about the Messiah. That's what you want to do. I would say there's another way of doing it.
Let me just pause.
There's another way of doing it. There's another way of doing it, which is that you look on that you look at both of them as talking about messianic or verses, also known as redemption verses about redemption of Israel.
Right.
Because in Jewish theology, the Messiah is to be the Redeemer of Israel.
Yes. So again, but if you're saying they're both about the redemption and saying
Not about the Redeemer,
yes,
both about the redemption.
but the problem is one of them talks about the Redeemer and the redemption, and then you're saying the other one
No, that's
because
not true. One of them talks about only the
donkey.
Redeemer, and the other one talks about only the redemption.
okay, but that's what I'm saying. That is your.
But the Redeemer is a major part of
Yes.
the redemption.
But what I'm trying to now say, people can decide for themselves.
Yes.
That Josh's view is that one talks about the Redeemer, and the other verse talks about the redemption. And I've also read from this Jewish text, the Sanhedrin 98a, where they put it. The rabbi is talking about a contradiction in how the Messiah is arriving. Because when I started this, and we were talking about Islam, what did I say to you? I will appeal to your Jewish text and show that there is a consistency, or at least a basis for the Christian belief within Judaism's thought. So that's why I said, like with Islam, there are stories that you don't seem to be aware of. For example, Moses being chased by a stone. But I'm saying, when Jesus says, "I am the Son of Man, and you'll see me coming in the clouds of heaven," these are things taken from the Old Testament. Now, we're also seeing that there can be, let's just for argument's sake, that there is a possibility that some interpreted it as a messianic type verse, or about how the Messiah is going to come. So when we look at our Christian theology, and we go back into some of even... Five.
Alright, I have to change my clock. It said it's 6, I'm not sure. I need to check 7.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
what
we'll
time it meant on my clock.
we won't be too long. So
Alright.
that is what my argument is, that these concepts that we have drawn from Christianity can actually be traced back to some of the things that rabbis have said. Whether you agree with the consensus or not, it shows that these are not just picked out of the air, that at least taken from the text, whereas within Islam, these are things that, even with, for example, Deuteronomy 18:18, there's no rabbi that would have said this could possibly be talking about someone who's not an Israelite.
Yeah.
Well, at least with us,
That's
we are
true.
saying
That's
there
true.
are some arguments where people have...
Maybe McKenna is true. McKenna is due. You're making original arguments. You're trying to be clever about it. Okay.
Thank you.
Unlike the Muslims, where look, you're not dealing with the usual stuff. You're not dealing with the usual.
Twisting of meaning.
Yeah, the usual twisting, like Isaiah 7:14, Isaiah 53. You're not dealing with those kind of things. Psalms 22, 110, etc. Right? And you're not dealing with Muslim twist. Okay, because of course Christians and Muslims have been the same twistings for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, right? Maimonides talks about this, the Muslims about Deuteronomy 18 in his letter to the Yemenite Jews, the Ageres Tamar. Okay, he already talks about some of the Muslim claims back then. The Ibn Ezra and Abavanel and many others talk about Christian interpretations of Isaiah 53 or whatever all the way back then. Those are not new. I need to give you credit where credit is due, that you are bringing new arguments to the table that is making people have to think more.
Well, now this is...
Not that we don't have answers to them.
Well,
I do have answers.
Well, this is the thing, because you just touch upon...
stopped recording or not?
So yes. Credit where credit is due. Very good.
Yeah.
Stop the shot.
Yeah, but sorry, about 2 hours. No.
Do you know when it stopped?
Don't worry, we've got the project. It's been
Okay.
recording the whole time.
Yeah, let thing, and then we'll just...
Hold on.
We've got Yehuda's to rely on.
Okay.
Which is very good.
Just an uncut version.
Because Yehuda's going to put it all on anyway.
What channel do you have?
We'll have to make one.
Okay, well, let me know.
Maybe, I think we'll make a new Jewish Speakers Corner channel. I think that's a good idea.
Sure.
Must be a few minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
A new Jewish
Yeah, we don't know
Speakers
how long
Corner
it stops
channel.
for.
Maybe like 2 minutes. Repeat it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay,
We'll
so
make a Jewish Speakers Corner channel, we'll put it up and we'll send you the thing, alright?
20, 30 minutes?
This gentleman been okay.
Okay,
recording.
so so what I also wanted to question you on is
I think it's about the prophethood of Muhammad.
What's next? Another Gemara?
9:6.
Oh yay! I was doing this on Sabbath. I was
Okay.
going over it just
So-
in case.
so
I'm
we'll-
so glad.
We
Are
will
you
go
going to do the argument from the cantillation?
from the what?
From the cantillation notes. You're going to do that argument or
What's
a
the
different
cantillation?
one? Alright, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you because I
Okay.
can't be bothered to deal with that.
Okay, let him to press this one here.
Alright.
So
Go on the virgin bit. The
The
virgin
camera there.
That's 7:14. He's doing 9.
Well,
yeah, or shall we do? Will we done
I
Isaiah?
like to see this coming soon.
You've done 53. It's finished. People of Israel, obviously.
Okay, and also one other point I wanted to highlight before we go into some of the meat of the text, because we discussed the timeline of when Christ was supposed to come the first time round.
We're going to do
And-
the 70 weeks now.
Huh?
We're going to do the 70 weeks?
No,
go,
I just
go.
wanted
No,
to
no, no.
highlight because I showed you this
I'm ready.
before.
I'm ready.
Because he said that all Jews now have to believe in being repentant and doing good, and then
Yeah.
at some point the Messiah will come. And I said no. There was a specific time point that the Messiah
the
was
dates
supposed to
have
come,
passed. Yeah,
and
I
all the
remember
dates, like within Jewish text, it says the dates have passed.
Yeah.
Now, also, I wanted to
I
just show,
explained that in a previous video, if you remember.
just for our Christian audience. Now, in Yoma 39b, it says the sages taught during the tenure
here we
of
are.
Shimon has how do you say it? Has attacked
Sorry? Oh, Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous,
the lot
Simon the
for
just.
God always arose in the high priest's right hand after his death. It occurred only occasionally, but during the 40 years prior to the destruction of the second temple, the lot for
yes,
God
I
did not arise in the high priest's right hand at all. So basically, this destruction of the temple was 70 AD. 40 years before takes us to 30 AD.
Yeah.
So what this text is showing us within the Jewish Talmud is that God stopped accepting the sacrifices from the Israelites from their side for some unapparent reasons. They don't know why. From a Christian perspective, I will say it seemed to be a coincidence that 40 years before was the crucifixion of Christ, and from that time, God stopped accepting sacrifices within the temple.
So let's first have a look at what Rashi says.
Okay, let's go back to the text.
All right. So if you click on the thing, where are we? Is this the Safari website?
Yeah, this is a screenshot.
Oh, you're not on the Safari website. I can't go on the commentaries.
No, I need to go online for that.
Oh, all right. Will you
Okay.
do that?
I have to go from my phone because this one you have to go through the internet. You that so you want to look at the interpretation.
I want to look at the commentary of Rashi because that's usually my first port of call. I have seen this Gemara before in the context of Christians,
And no prophets since then.
but I do like to see Rashi.
Yeah,
prophet
no.
since before
Well,
that as well.
coincidentally, well, no prophet since Malachi.
Yeah, exactly. Before that. Okay.
So, and then I just wanted to highlight to the audience as well. As I said, I'll use the
Yeah.
Jewish text, and I'm not twisting them, but they've said themselves 40 years before the destruction of
Yeah.
the temple,
I mean, of course-
sacrifices
of course.
seem to stop, and it seems to
What's
coincide.
Jesus got to do with 40
and
years before the
because it
temple?
seems to coincide with the time frame that was established for the Messiah to come. Because remember, my point was this: they said all the allotted times have passed. So for the allotted times to have passed, that means there had to be a certain time frame. Then when they believe he didn't come, then they say now we're just waiting in expectation, because it wasn't an understanding of, well, he's going to come at any point. It was he should come around this time. But now the Jewish interpretation is, well, he hasn't come, so we don't know when he's coming. But what Christians are saying is that actually there was a Messiah who came during that allotted time, but you guys do not accept him. So now, let me just find this thing for you.
Not a Messiah, the Messiah.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. We'll get into that as well, if we have
I like
time.
you. You're a character. What's your name?
Can't tell you my name for security
Because
Fair enough. We'll call him
reasons.
Fred.
Security reasons.
We'll call him Fred.
but we'll
Fred.
for time reasons, let's go into something else.
All right. Look,
Because-
look, I'll tell you what I think is probably going on here, because I know that the in the years coming up to the destruction of the Second Temple, which of course was destroyed because of sins of the Jewish people.
What were the sins?
Okay. Mainly it was because of baseless hatred between Jews. Sinas Chinuch. That was the main reason why the Second Temple was destroyed. The Second Temple was destroyed mainly because of baseless hatred, as we say, Sinas
Between
Chinuch.
which Jews?
Between Jews, just
Like
all
what kind
Jews.
of hatred?
I don't know what type of hatred, just hatred.
Okay.
Right? People were not loving their fellow Jew, which is a terrible thing. And it could very well be that the sins of the Jewish people had intensified so much in the 40 years prior to the destruction of the Second Temple that that God simply would not bring atonement for them anymore, using he would no longer accept the Day of Atonement service anymore. That could very well be the case.
And obviously the Christian argument is it seems to be very coincidental that we say Christ was wounded for our transgressions and crucified for our sins, that occurrence happened just coincidentally 40 years before the temple was destroyed, and coincidentally around the same time when God stopped accepting sacrifices, around the same time when we say Christ offered himself as a sacrifice, which was the final atonement for mankind.
Oh, by the way, I should point your attention, Ali Dawa, in case you want to bring him in because of you were so interested in him earlier, is over there.
That's fine. We'll talk later because now going on to the crucifixion, we'll go into Isaiah 53.
Yay!
Because
Thank you so much.
now what would want to build up is an understanding of where did this concept of Christians accepting this as Jesus, a prophecy about Jesus, come from.
Oh,
because
yes.
I asked you earlier on, I'd just like to confirm, who was Jonathan ben Uziel?
Jonathan ben Uziel was a student of Zechariah, Haggai, and Malachi.
So he was apparently
The last three prophets.
a disciple of 3 prophets.
Yes.
Now, he lived in, the Targum was written in which century?
Well, the Targum of him
Yeah.
was written by him.
Okay, so that was like early 1st century
Thi-
BC. or-
This was during the time when the second temple had just been built. I don't know what century that is.
Okay,
but
so
whichever
before
century.
Christianity. and
Oh yeah, a
whatnot.
long time before. that.
Okay, so now
We're going to
Josh,
deal with him, and you're
Josh,
going to
Josh has confirmed
particular verse.
that the Targum was written by Jonathan ben Uziel,
Yes.
who was a disciple of not one, not
Three
2,
prophets.
but 3 prophets.
Okay.
Now, when we go to his Targum,
Don't worry, we're gonna put it on the screen.
We're going to
Isaiah
take one
53.
verse
We're
out
gonna
of
put
the
it in the screen,
entire
everyone.
Targum.
no, we'll start from verse 1,
Alright.
and I'll explain it
Oh, wait,
to you.
you're not doing
Fact
52:13. You're doing 53.
Yeah, I'll start from 1.
I am very surprised.
I'm starting from 1.
I really
So it
am.
says-
Why? What? Yeah.
Because usually the thing is to take from 52:13
Yeah,
and,
but
just
we-
to, and just to do that because he says the servant's the Messiah,
Yeah, but
and then to build a thing
but
off of
now,
that
let's-
without looking at the rest.
But
I'm
now,
surprised.
that's
at
fine because it still helps our position.
Sure.
So it says, who have believed in our report, and whom is now the power of the arm of the Lord revealed? The righteous shall be great before him. Behold, like branches that bud, and like a tree which sends forth its roots by the streams of water.
Two streams.
Thus shall the generation of the just multiply in the land, which hath
That's not
need
what it says.
of him. Well, you can correct it.
completely
This is a translation, so maybe your translation is different, but we'll get to that anyways. So it says, his visage is not.
Sorry.
This is translated directly from the Aramaic.
Guys.
Yeah, that's fine. Anything you disagree with, we can go back to it.
All right.
So it says, his visage shall not be the visage of a common person, neither his fear of a plebeian.
Plebeian.
Well,
Anyone
plebeian.
know what a plebeian is?
I think it's like a.
Pleb.
Yeah.
Wait, is that where the word pleb comes from?
Common man.
But even I'm learning something now.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
gosh.
so then it says, but a
Speaker's
holy
corner,
brightness
even-
shall be his brightness, that
We
everyone
learn
who
that words.
sees him shall contemplate him. Although he shall be in contempt, yet he shall cut off the glory of all the wicked. They shall be weak and wretched. Lo, we are in contempt and not redeemed. That's verse 4. As a man of pain and appointed to sickness, as if he had removed the face of his Shekinah from us. Therefore, he shall pray for our sins, and our iniquities for his sake shall be forgiven us. For we are considered crushed, smitten of the Lord, and afflicted. He shall build the house of the sanctuary, which has been profaned on account of our sins. He was delivered over on account of our iniquities, and through his doctrine peace shall be multiplied upon us. And through the teaching of his words, our sin shall be forgiven us. Like all we like sheep have been scattered, every one of us has turned to his own way. It pleased the Lord to forgive the sins of all of us for his sake. He shall pray.
No, it's in the past tense.
He shall pray and
No.
shall be. Well, anything, just correct me afterwards. You can read your version. He shall pray and shall be answered. Yea, before he shall open his mouth, he shall be heard. He shall deliver over the mighty of the nations as a lamb to the slaughter, and like a. So 8, 9. Like sheep before her shearers is dumb, none shall in his presence open his mouth or speak a word. He shall gather our captives from affliction and pain, and who shall be able to narrate the wonderful works which shall be done for us in his days? Shall he remove the rule of the nations from the land of Israel, the sins of which my people have committed and have upon them? And he shall deliver the wicked into hell, and the riches of the treasures which they got by violence unto the death of Abaddon, that that they who commit sin shall not remain, and that they should not speak folly with their mouth. And it was the pleasure of the Lord to refine and to purify the remnant of his people, in order to cleanse their souls from sin, that they might see the kingdom of their Messiah, that their sons and daughters might multiply and prolong their days, and those that keep. I stopped at 13.
Read the end of the verse. Don't stop at the middle of a verse.
Oh, because it's numbered differently. So, okay, I'll go to 12.
And
He shall
those-
deliver their souls from...
No, you missed something.
Yeah. So,
And prolong the days, and those that keep the law of the Lord shall prosper
was
to
that
his
in the
pleasure.
pleasure?
You
Okay.
stopped before
All right.
that.
Okay, yeah. And yeah, that the Messiah, that their sons and daughters might multiply and prolong their days, and those that keep the law of their Lord shall prosper through his pleasure.
Yes.
Now, the reason why I wanted to draw our attention to this is because Christians always claim this is about the Messiah. Now, Josh has confirmed that this is in a text that came before the Christianity,
Yeah.
and the person mentioned the Messiah in it, therefore indicating it is a messianic verse. Now, if this person was taught by not one, but two, not two, but three prophets, how did his interpretation of this verse, because Josh is going to tell me this is about the nation of Israel, but I'm going to ask him, anyone who came with a different interpretation, were these people taught by a prophet, according to him? So why is their understanding superseding this person who was taught by not one, not two, but three prophets, and he mentioned the Messiah before Christianity?
Guys, the pub
Well,
are gonna close soon, so
it's-
just bear that in mind.
Okay.
It's quite clear from these verses of Yonasan ben Uziel, his Targum here, the explanation of the verses, that the sufferer is the people of Israel, but the servant is the Messiah. He seems to be drawing a very clear distinction between the two. And you can see that throughout here,
So can the nation of Israel suffer for its own sins?
obviously.
But the person came to redeem Israel from their sins. So if
Yeah.
Israel is the sinner, they cannot redeem themselves from their own sins.
They're not redeeming themselves from their own sins. The Redeemer, the Messiah, is coming. Look, the Targum is not translating literally the verses, obviously.
Yes.
Okay. Now in the verses, we don't see any distinction between the servant of God and the one who has suffered. Okay. And the Targum draws a distinction between those two.
Yes.
And the servant ends up being the Messiah, and the one who has suffered is the people of Israel.
So the one who has suffered is who?
Is the people of Israel.
So, okay.
And
now,
and he already starts
who
that
bears the-
in 52:14, as the house of where he says, as the house of Israel looked to him during many days, because their countenance was darkened among the peoples, and their complexion beyond the sons of men. And that's how it continues from there.
so who received the iniquity? Who was cut?
Received the iniquity. Which verse is that? Just remind me.
Because it says he was cut off from the land of the
Let's
living.
find out. Yeah, here it is. Is that verse 10? Which verse is that?
Hold on.
Verse 9. Where's land of the living? I can't remember what it is.
So when it says, who received the iniquity of the
Is that
Lord?
verse 6 or verse 4? Which verse are you?
Let me just go back into it. So if we go into 3, for
Verse
example,
3. Okay. So verse 3 says.
Or 4.
Okay. Verse 3 in the Targum. Then he will become despised and will cut off the glory of all the kingdoms. They will be prostrate into mourning,
Yeah.
like a man of pains and like one destined for sicknesses, and as though the presence of the Shekhinah has been withdrawn from us. They will be despised and esteemed not.
Yeah, carry on.
Then for our sins he will pray, and our iniquities will for his sake be forgiven, although we were accounted stricken, smitten from before the Lord, and afflicted.
And next one.
But he will build up the holy place which has been polluted for our sins, and delivered to the enemy for our iniquities, and by his instruction peace shall be increased upon us, and by devotion to his words our sins will be forgiven.
Okay, so let me.
Could you just hold on a second? I just need to have a look at 52:15.
We might have to move it that way
to
because the
make
part's
sure
closing.
it's closing.
Okay.
52:15. So really scattering the people. Oh, Oh.
So shall I read it
Oh,
in?
here we are. Hold on a
Do
second.
you want to read it
hold
from
on.
your Tanakh as well, so we can compare the two?
Oh, I actually have the
paraphrase.
comparison. I have
Okay.
one after the other. The verse from the Tanakh, followed by the verse in the Talmud.
Okay, where's verse 4?
So verse 4 is over here. That's the Isaiah,
Okay, yeah.
and
Read
that's the
read
Talmud.
verse 5.
Verse 5 in the Tanakh or the Talmud
The Tanakh.
says,
Yeah.
but he was wounded. What's going on over there?
Don't worry. We can't see anyway. So yeah.
Because he was wounded because of our transgressions.
Now who was wounded?
Well, according to the text, according to the Talmud, what do you want? Who was wounded?
Israel or the Messiah?
Well, obviously the people of Israel were wounded.
So okay. Now the reason why I asked you that, because if we go to Ruth Rabbah,
Ah.
it says the Messiah and he will eat in the world to come. The fifth explanation for come here is King Messiah, come here that is draw near to kingship, and eat from the bread that is the bread of kingship, and dip your morsel in the vinegar. This is the chastisement, as it is said, but he was wounded for our transgressions, Isaiah 53. So this is clearly, they've seen it as a messianic verse, because you've put it's Israel, but here they're saying in the book of Ruth, whatever, this verse is what happened in the book of Ruth is a reference or symbolism of King Messiah who was wounded because of our transgression. So when Christians say Isaiah 53 is about the Messiah and not about Israel, and we're appealing to someone who was taught according to you by 3 prophets, this is why I say the later rabbis came. Okay, well,
They're chucking everybody out.
okay, can we just continue?
Okay.
Yeah, just go about 10, 15
Can I
minutes.
ask you a question? Can I ask you-
Sure.
Okay, you see the first command, yeah? What is
Yeah.
it?
No,
It's a quick question.
Yeah,
First one, the Ten Commandments.
yeah, yeah.
I
Does that
am-
go for both of you?
I am the
Yes.
Lord.
So, but you believe in one God,
Yeah.
but you believe in...
3 in 1.
Next time he's here, we'll have that conversation. Come and listen to it.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
You believe in one God, yeah?
It'll take too long to go into. If you're here next
So
time,
you follow the first
I
commandment.
believe absolute, he believes composite.
So you believe, yeah. So you
we don't
believe in the
believe
first
composite.
commandment.
Yes, you do.
If,
Right,
if you're here next week, we'll
Because
have that
the
discussion.
author of the first commandment.
Oh, he's got a little bit to finish off. That's why.
Yes.
Because I just want to wrap up this bit on the Messiah.
All right, cool. Let's go. But we have to go out though, Paperboy.
I know, that's the bullshit. You alright?
Yeah, yeah. All right, cool. Come Hey, stop putting guys. You should go to church. You need church. You need church. Elvis left the building.
Bottles of wine and
Elvis left the building. Right, let me.
yeah, we just to conclude. So we conclude it. Like,
All right, we'll
properly.
deal with
Okay,
Ruth Rabbah next time, and we'll just we'll
Or-
plug now. So we'll wrap up.
Is it still recording? Alright,
Is
cool.
that you
Yeah.
all right with that? We'll
Or-
deal with Ruth. Well, we'll deal with Ruth Rabbah next time.
Yeah, or do you want to conclude with that?
So I'll have to look into the medrash there.
Okay, so
Learning medrash is a very fine art.
okay, so basically, I just repeat, and we'll wrap up shortly because the park is closing. So basically, what I did, I brought up the Targum and Jonathan Ben Uzel, who said that the Isaiah 53 was about the Messiah. Then we had Josh, who said it was about the nation of Israel, because that's what now the later rabbinic consensus is. But my argument has always been, when you look at a lot of the text, we see concepts that that Christians come up with buried within Judaism's very own text. So that's why when he said, well, it seems strange that apparently if someone's taught by the prophets, they've got it completely wrong by some of the rabbis who were never taught by any of the prophets. Then I went to Ruth Rabbah, which also reflects on Isaiah 53 to confirm that this is a passage about the Messiah being wounded. Now, even when I spoke to you before, you said every interpretation is correct when you go. So that means this verse is about the Messiah, and somehow it's also about Israel too. Because if both one can't be incorrect. So according to your own logic, this you therefore have to accept this.
Learning Medrash is a very fine art.
Yes.
I'm gonna delve into the Ruth Rabbah next time. Okay, next time we're gonna analyze it. We're gonna see how you've misunderstood what Ruth Rabbah is actually doing. Because there's a certain methods that Medrash uses. That's for next time. Alright? When it comes to the Targum, I'd like to say this. The Targum draws, and I've said this before, a very clear distinction between the servant and the sufferer. And throughout the Targum, it is very clear that the servant is the Messiah, whilst the sufferer is the house of Israel.
Well, and just on one last note,
also, it's very possible that the speaker from verse 1 onwards may actually be the kings of the nations, if you follow it on from what he said in the last verse of chapter 52. That's also very possible.
Okay,
and
so
should not be disregarded.
So on that note, we shall conclude. We'll continue with the messianic verses and who the Messiah was next time, because there's probably plenty of more that I can go into.
Of course.
So, in conclusion, I just want to say that the reason why, again, I started with Islam was looking at some of the stories, and they said, and asked whether Muhammad could be a true prophet, and looking at some of the inconsistencies within Islamic texts and the Quran with Jewish history and thought and understanding. Then when we've jumped to the concept of the Messiah, I've been able to base an argument based on things that we can pull from Jewish sources itself. Even though there may be some disagreements within understanding certain passages, we also see a certain common link between some Christian thought and things that are within Jewish texts. So it's not that Christians are inventing interpretations of some verses. There are some verses we may disagree with totally. But again, one of the core proof texts that Christian uses is Isaiah 53, and I've clearly demonstrated that one of the earliest rabbis, who apparently was taught by 3 prophets, understood this verse to be a messianic verse. And we also I proof text it with something else that also said the Messiah was pierced and wounded for our transgression. So Jews cannot complain that Christians are making things up out of the air, because we've actually shown things from within their text, and as Josh said in our last conversation, that every opinion has to be correct. Even if they appear contradictory in some metaphysical way, they are all correct. So therefore, the Christians are, according to Josh, in some way also correct. So if you would like to have the final word.
Oh, thank you.
Josh.
Okay, so Paperboy, of course, started talking about my conversation with Ali Dawa and talking about Muslims. And whilst that was an interesting conversation, it's really much more interesting when you talk to Muslims themselves instead of just talking about it behind their backs. It doesn't really do much in terms of getting anything out of a discussion. And as for Paperboy's unique arguments, which of course have been started really by people like Michael Brown over the last few decades. These new arguments where they try to find places in rabbinic texts, like the Talmud, like the Medrash, like the Targum, and try to fit it in with what they have to say, is it's a credit to them that they're starting to make new arguments. But as I've shown with already the Targum and with the with one Gemara already, this is not really the true understanding of these rabbinic texts. Rabbinic texts need to be understood in the way that they intended to be understood, not in the way that you want them to be understood. As for the Medrash and the Ruth Rabbah, we're going to deal with that hopefully next time, God willing. But until then,
thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you,
Until
Josh.
next time.